Right before we jump into this video, if you'd like me to send you a free guide to capturing motion in low light situations, just look for this orange box over on FroKnowsPhoto.com, put your name, email address in it, hit send it. I'll send you that guide for free. Jared Polin, FroKnowsPhoto.com, and this is a preview of the Nikon 600mm f4 with a 1.4 TC built in. This is a VRS lens. It has the S right here on the side. Now this is following in the footsteps of their 400mm TC, which was a 400mm 2.8 with a built-in 1.4 converter, and this is now a 600mm f4 with a built-in 1.4 teleconverter. Now, before I get too far, this is a pre-production model of the lens. So that's why this is not called a review, because we only had about an hour to go take it out to the Philadelphia Union, who were practicing over by Subaru Park, to take some photos with them. And this type of lens is something that you would use for sports or wildlife. A lot of people are going to say birds, because there's a lot of rich people out there who like to spend a lot of money on something like this. And I guarantee you that the majority of the people buying this are going to be rich doctors and lawyers who don't shoot Leica, or who may shoot Leica, but also like to shoot birds. For whatever reason, a lot of people like to shoot birds. Anyway, I was using the Nikon Z9 to take the photos that I was capturing. Now, the Z9 had a beta firmware version 3.0. And at the time of us shooting and recording this, the firmware wasn't out just yet in full production mode. So just know it was beta firmware 3.0. I didn't run into any issues while using it. It did what it was supposed to do, at least to the best of my knowledge. All right, now that we got that out of the way, how does it feel in the hands? I mean, it's a big lens. It's big, but it only weighs in at 7.19 pounds or 3,260 grams, and is actually 14% lighter than the F version of the 600mm. Now, of course, the F version didn't have any teleconverter built in. And if you're someone who has played with the 400 2.8 TC, this is a little over a half of a pound heavier. So it's not that much more. You could handhold this if you're not an old dentist or doctor who doesn't have good arms, or who has arthritis. You're most likely going to put this on a monopod, because it's just easier to shoot off of that, or on a Wimberley head, or whatever type of ball head that you're going to use. But it is not that heavy at 7 pounds. I mean, I could totally work out with it. I'm not used to 7 pounds. Usually we're like curling 70 pounds for these guns right here. But in this case, it feels very good in the hands. I wouldn't expect anything else. So let's go around the outside of the lens. You have 4 custom control buttons on here. I've personally never set them to anything, but I'm sure there are people out there who do. You've got your control ring right here. You have a function control ring right here. Kind of looks like piano keys and all of that good stuff. But the real thing that you want to see is this. This is your TC. Right here it says 1X. You flip it down, it says 1.4. So you go from a 600 f4 to an 840 5.6, and you can go to 1260 millimeters when you put it into the DX mode. Now, if you want to get jiggy with it, you can. I can say Will Smith stuff jokes, right, Steven? We can bring Will Smith back. We're bringing it back. If you want to get jiggy with it, you can still put on TC converters on the end of this and get even more. But when you look at this lens, where I'm out at 840 millimeters with the soccer players at a distance, you can see all of the heat rising in the background. That is some of the things that you're going to start to see the more you add to the end of it. I'm not someone who would ever add extra teleconverters to the teleconverters that are built in. And as you know, I have a video all about why I hate teleconverters. But what I will tell you, and I said it in that video, when you're using high-end lenses, high-end glass with the high-end teleconverters, it's going to be a little better than when you use crappy glass. In this case, it's all done in line. It's right in line inside of the camera. Now, when you do flip the TC on, the Z9 tells you that the TC is active inside of the camera. The one complaint that I have and other sports photographers have that I've talked to who use the 400 TC is that when you flip that switch and you shoot manual exposure, you still have to go in and obviously change that one stop. Either raise your ISO by a stop, or you need to, or drop it depending on which way you're going. But I would prefer that it automatically knows that I'm losing light. When I flick it from 1x to 1.4x, I think even in manual exposure, it should just drop that shutter speed, boom. Drop it by one stop. Now, some people might say, Jared, why don't you shoot auto ISO? Because auto ISO still isn't someplace that I like to shoot. There's very rare occurrences where it makes a lot of sense. But when you're photographing players, and in this case, with the Philadelphia Union players, some of them are very dark skinned against someone who is very light skinned. The auto ISO is going to be thrown off and go all over the place for that, and we're just shooting in daylight. So the ISO should just be locked in that case. So that's why I personally don't use auto ISO, but it would be nice that when you flick that switch, it will drop it or raise it by a stop. You should be able to say, hey, cut my shutter speed by a stop, or bump the ISO or lower the ISO by a stop. You should have control of that when you flick this switch. Hopefully the engineers are going to work on that, because that is something that I and other sports shooters would like to see. That's basically the outside of the lens. Did I say drop-in filters yet? Actually, no, I didn't, but it has 46 millimeter drop-in filters in the back. You take it out, boom, there's your drop-in filter. If you wanted to do a neutral density, or you want to do a polarizing filter, that is where you would go, if you can find one. It was very difficult for me to find one for the 800 5.6, or sorry, the 800 6.3. It was difficult for me to find one, but I did find one when I went out to NASA. Let me jump in here real quick, because I want to show you this photo taken with the Nikon Z9 and edited with FroPack 3, starting with Zoolander. Boom. Zoolander looks great. Then we've got Prestige Worldwide, followed by November Rain, Mount Airy, Mentos, King Contrast, Eckert, Capone, and Fifth Element. Those look great, but the way I love to edit my sports photos is with Skittles. With one click, bam, Skittles looks absolutely fantastic. So look, if you're looking to speed up your raw workflow or give yourself a great starting point on mobile or desktop, we created 15 custom Lightroom presets that you can check out right now at FroKnowsPhoto.com/FroPack3. While you're over there, you can play with the sliders to see the befores and the afters. And if you decide to pick them up right now, they're currently on sale. Or if you want to get Skittles as part of FroPack 1, you can get the triple play bundle that includes FroPack 1, 2, and 3, and you can save even more. Now, let's get back to the video. Let's jump into some of these photos right here so I can show you the difference between 600 and 840. So right here, this one's at 600 millimeters. The focus is fine. It focuses like a Nikon Z9 focuses. Anybody that has shot with a Nikon Z9 understands what I mean by that. Even using the new 3.0 firmware, a lot of people are gonna be like, oh, it's gonna make it that much better. I didn't notice it being that much better. I noticed it did what it does. It shoots like a Nikon. You know, comparing it to a Sony or comparing it to a Canon, it's still not on that level, but it's a hell of a lot better, as we know, than the Z6 II and the Z7 II, and anybody that's used a Nikon like that and gone to a Z9 totally understands what I'm saying. Hopefully, there's a Z8 and whatever else coming in the future that builds off of the autofocus that Nikon has gotten much better in the Z9. Hopefully, they build on that in the future. But the colors and tones, they're exactly what you expect from the Nikon. Perfectly fine. Let me look at these settings real quick. So you'll see I'm shooting at 1/5000th of a second at f4 at ISO 320. I do that because I know that when I put in the teleconverter, I go to a 5.6, which means I lose a stop. So all I have to do is drop my shutter speed, just 3 clicks of the button, because I have it set to a third, and that will drop it the one stop that I need. Or I could bump the ISO up higher with one press of a button and twist, and I'd be up to where I needed to be. So I make sure that I have a fast enough shutter speed to compensate for the loss of light that I'm going to run into there. Next, for this vertical, I'm at 840 millimeters. So what the players were doing when we showed up there, they were playing soccer volleyball or soccer tennis or whatever, because, oh, it's tennis because it's allowed to bounce on your side once. That's what they were doing. They were just having a good time getting ready for their next game and playing around. They weren't running around the field, running drills or anything like that. So this is what we had to shoot. And also we had to stay out of areas just in case someone recognized me with this lens and I accidentally show up on the internet again with something new. But yeah, I mean, it's a very limiting lens. 600 millimeters is limiting. 840 millimeters is even more limiting. But we know that bird photographers and wildlife photographers are all weird. And by that I mean they're weird. You know that they're weird. And, you know, when I say weird, you know I'm joking. But anyway, a lot of bird photographers are gonna love something like this if they can afford this. And we'll get to the price at the end of this video because you're gonna need to afford it or sell a kidney or just be a rich person who gets a lens like this. The colors, tones, exactly what you would expect from it. This one is also at 840 millimeters. Looks clean, looks sharp, looks colorful. The focus tracks the subjects exactly how you would feel because it uses those, let me get this right. Silky, Swift, voice, coil, motors, woo! With 9 rounded blades, woo! Silky Swift motors. They got magnets. Oh, so if you have a pacemaker, you probably don't want to put this lens up to your chest because you might put yourself in AFib or DFib or whichever fib it is, and you might never return. Thanks, Nikon. Continuing on, this is 840 millimeters at a distance, exactly what I was talking about the background. It's not bad bokeh. There's always people that look at these videos and go, the bokeh's bad, especially from the baseball field. They're like, the bokeh's bad. I'm like, no, that's netting in the background that's out of focus. So the same thing's happening here. We got power lines out of focus, mixing in with the heat coming off of the ground. That's what happens at a distance. You see that in the Sahara or wherever they're photographing in Africa to get the lions and tigers and no bears. They're at a distance and you can see the heat waves. That's what you see. So that's what happens at more millimeters. But everything is fine. I took pictures of balls because there were balls sitting right here. So you got some balls. That doesn't tell you anything other than they're just pictures. Zooming in on this guy, we are at 600 millimeters. Look, you know that if you're a sports shooter and you need this lens, it's going to do exactly what you need if you're a Nikon shooter. I'm happy with the results I got. I didn't expect not to be happy because the 400 TC was unique and amazing. And I do think that Canon and Sony are going to start to get into this game and follow suit and copy exactly what Nikon has done. So Nikon has really started something here by putting TCs in to these big ass pieces of glass. So good on Nikon for pushing that. But this photo looks fantastic. Great colors, great tones, great sharpness. Next up, there was a kid just dribbling the soccer ball. Figured I would get some photos of him because he was not just playing the volleyball thing or the tennis thing that they were playing, but the focus worked exactly how I expected it to work. It shoots like a Nikon Z9 Shoots. It focuses like the lenses focus, the high-end lenses focus for the Nikon. So perfectly fine, gets the job done. There's always some weird things that I've found with the Z9 in comparison, being that I've used the R3 extensively and I've used the A1 extensively. It does still feel like the Nikon is third in line of the three, and that hopefully changes in the future. And I can't say definitively yet with the beta firmware 3.0 whether that has made a substantial difference in autofocus, but in my time shooting with it, the hour of shooting these soccer players, it just felt like it's always felt. I didn't really notice much of a difference from 2.0 all the way up to 3.0. Let me jump in here real quick and let you know that this video is brought to you by Squarespace. If you're looking to build your very own online portfolio, use what I use for my personal site, jaredpolin.com, because it's simple, easy, and affordable, and I still don't need to know any coding, and either do you. So head on over to squarespace.com/FroKnowsPhoto to get your 14-day free trial. If you decide that it's for you, use the code FroKnowsPhoto at checkout to get 10% off your first order. So there were a couple of players that stuck around a little longer to do some kicks, also grab a 360 camera for their social media, and this was, I was able to track them. We were at 600 millimeters. You fill the frame. This is what you get with 600 millimeters. It's one of these lenses that you fill the frame with the subject. Now keep in mind, if all you do is ever fill the frame with the subject, you may never see any of the context. I don't understand the birding photography. I know people like seeing a titmouse at a distance or a kingfisher or whatever the hell it is that they shoot. I personally don't get it, but I do understand the fun or the mental freeing of going out into the wild or the wilderness and just hanging around and just waiting for something to happen. I can understand that. But from a professional standpoint, the people that need this lens, they're going to be the ones that go ahead and pick it up. You just got to get your composition locked in because everything moves around so much when you're at 600 and even when you're at 840. It's just a lot more difficult to keep your composition perfect as they're kicking the soccer ball. And the last one here looks like he's throwing the ball. He's not throwing the ball. He just kicked kicked it. We banged off a couple of shots, and this looks really nice. Nice sharpness, nice color. Just keep in mind, it was about 11:45 a.m., so the sun was pretty much straight up in the sky. Now, there is something that I want to mention from firmware 3.0 that we did test out because it's a good test with a lens like this, is we tried out the 60 frames per second mode, which is 60 frames per second in DX crop, in JPEG only. You do not get RAW files, but it kept up perfectly well, tracking that the whole time. Just about every photo looked to be in focus, so it was good that the lens was able to keep up with it with the 60 frames per second. So how much is this lens? It's this much, $15,499. That's expensive. That's really expensive. But in the grand scheme of things, it's not that expensive for what it is. And the people that can afford it are gonna buy this all day long. Not that Nikon's gonna be able to supply it very much, because I guarantee you, as soon as they announce it, they're gonna be like, it's so popular that we're not gonna take any more orders because we can't keep up with them. They're gonna sell a ton of these to the birders and the sports photographers who still shoot Nikon. Guaranteed, because it is a fantastic lens. Now, two more things. We've got the sniff test and wind tunnel test. Let's start off with the wind tunnel test, Steven. You ready? Yeah. Here we go. Woo! I think it failed the wind tunnel test this time because the wind did not have a lot of space to go around it. Speaking of space, this is what it smells like. Do you know that orange stuff around the SLS rocket, Steven, from NASA? Yeah. That's like the foam that insulates it. It smells like that orange stuff that's around it of the SLS rocket. All right, guys, so do you think this is overpriced? I don't think it's overpriced. I think it's priced exactly where it needs to be. What do you think about this lens? Leave some comments down below. Thank you very much for watching. Jared, Polin, FroKnowsPhoto.com. See ya.